This is our webinar on career opportunities in big data from the analytics program at Canisius College. My co-host today is Jim Goldstein to my left, and I'm Dave Sheets. Jim's the director of the business analytics program at Canisius, and I'm director of the data science program. We've got some good panelists today. I'll just introduce them really briefly, and then we'll get a little chance to know them a little bit as we go on here. Emily Ladico, Vice President M&T, Treasury Quantitative Manager. Emily's in the middle there. Jim Moore, Associate Director, Americas Regional ITS at Lindsey Praxair, recent merger of those two. We have Shilpam Pandey from the Enterprise Data Program at M&T Bank. And we have Mark Peer, Manager in Financial Services Innovation at PricewaterhouseCoopers. So those would be your panelists today. So to sort of set the scene here, we have a sort of a statement about big data. As big data becomes more and more important in our economy, many companies in Western New York are increasing their uses of data-driven approaches in decision-making. As part of the effort to build an information economy in Buffalo, Canisius and other colleges are expanding our educational offerings in the big data space. There are a wide variety of career opportunities related to big data, and our panelists will be offering their insights on the breadth of job skills and career paths within big data. So I'll let Jim take over and offer the first question. Please feel free to pose questions in the chat. We will take some breaks at some point during the questions. We've got some prepared questions, but we will have some breaks in there where you can ask your questions to follow up on what we have. And then we'll have some time at the end as well to talk a little more. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And one of the nice things about doing something like this is that this recording will be available if anybody wants to review that again or pass it on to anybody else who's interested. And I'd like to thank our panelists too for taking the time to spending an hour with us today to talk about such an important topic. So the way this is going to work is we have put together some questions, but as Dave mentioned, we would really appreciate it if anybody has any questions to chat those in, and we'll give you a chance to actually get those answered. Our first question, kind of setting the tone. Now, it was mentioned where each of our panelists are actually working, what company they're at, but we can just kind of repeat that again, just to get a sense, like, in case you missed that. But the question is, where are you working now, and what is your current role in big data? And I'm going to throw out the follow-up with that too. So it's like, where are you currently working with big data? And did you enter your career path planning on working in the big data space, or did you end up in this area another way? So again, you know, what's your role, and did you plan that, or did you actually end up in the big data space another way? So we're going to go alphabetically. So I'm going to throw this over to Emily first from M&T. Emily, if you wouldn't mind addressing that, and then we'll just go to Jim after that and on forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So as was mentioned, my name is Emily Ladico. I work at M&T Bank. My title is actually a quantitative manager. And what that means and how I kind of fit into the big data space is my job is responsible for managing a team that builds predictive models and analytics for the bank. Specifically, what we focus on are building stress testing predictive models on various portions of our balance sheet to predict what might happen in different economic times. So if you think about what happened last year with the COVID-19 pandemic and how there were high moments of unemployment, and different scenarios going on, my job is to help best predict what's going to happen to various portions of our balance sheet when we hit hard economic times or when we're in okay times. So we deal with a lot of data to build on that, right? Where we're using historical data to understand what's happened in the past and how might that inform what we think of future expectations. So it's dealing with a lot of data there. So to your follow-up question of, did I end up here on purpose or was this kind of accidental? It was definitely accidental. My background, I'm a Canisius graduate, both bachelor's and master's. So my bachelor's was in computer science. And then I started my job at M&T. Originally, I thought I was actually going to go into software development, which wasn't going to be really as big data-driven as the work that I do now. And how I ended up at the bank was actually through a referral from my friend, who also works in the same department that I do. She told me of a position that was available working with a smaller data team at the bank. I decided to apply and I got the position. And then even on my first day on the job, I was tapped on the shoulder and say, hey, you're actually going to be doing some modeling work instead, working with data that way. So my career path definitely didn't go down the route that I'm sitting at today.
Great, thanks. you'd think I would get this mute thing correct after a year and a half, but I'm still struggling. Thanks, Emily. I'm going to actually ask Jim if he wanted to comment on that as well. So, like, again, what is your current role in the big data space, and how did you end up in that role? What did your career path look like in order to get you to this spot? So, Jim.
Yeah, for those who aren't aware, Lindsey's, we're an industrial, medical gas, whatever, you name the gas, we manufacture it and we transport it and move it around. So my role, I kind of backed into data analytics from the perspective of, I work in the software management side, information technology, and the part that I work on, we manage work for the US and basically North America and South America. And our applications tend to be more of the operational system. So I'm not really working directly with data analytics, but a lot of our data, we're looking at how do we move this data out of the systems that are collecting this, at high speeds. We're collecting data from drivers, trucks, scanners that are looking at filling tanks and things like that. So my background, I originally started, when I got out of college, I originally wanted to get into music, and that went down the tubes. But my background is mathematics, and my graduate degree is MBA. But went through software development, really enjoyed software development. So I was more software development, and then started working more with we work with some, probably not data sets as large as M&T and some of the other people on the panel here, but we're working with millions of cylinders, gas cylinders, how they're moving around and trying to predict, their behavior in terms of, when do we need to reorder and things like that. So that's why I'm definitely more interested in the data analytics part. I guess the mathematics part of me is very excited about what we can do with tools like with Spark, and then even programming, in R and Python, the tools that are available there to move data around and then do some all the statistical analysis that you can do pretty quickly with those tools.
Thanks, Jim. Shilpam, I think you'd be next as we're going in alphabetical order, so I'm going to throw it over to you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Shilpam Pandey. I work for M&T Bank as well, like Emily, but I'm part of the Enterprise Data Office. So we are a horizontal. My role at the bank is to work with all business lines to help enable use of data. It's not just our data assets. The bank has invested in its data assets, but broadly use of data, embedding data in our decision-making process. And of course, like Emily talked about, there are very sophisticated users of data, but different aspects of use of data. So my role is working with all the business lines. My journey to this spot is winding. My basic education is in architecture and urban planning. So I certainly came to data from a creative, analytical kind of mindset. I do have a master's degree in GIS, so geospatial data and satellite imagery. We now look back at it and say that's the original big data in terms of large volumes of data being streamed from satellites going over the earth. And I got an MBA because it was always the people and the change management aspects of it that fascinated me. That's been more or less my experience since I got my MBA 15 years ago along digital transformation and change management for adoption of data. And that's what I do at the bank right now.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And Mark, last but not least, just alphabetically last, Mark, if you could respond to the question, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So my name is Mark Peer, work at PwC or PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is one of the big four accounting firms internationally. And my role with big data is I work in a group called Financial Services Innovation, but I've also recently joined our deals and capital markets practice. And really where I interact with a lot of the data is in an audit sensibility. So for the vast majority of large corporations really in the world, various regulatory bodies mandate financial statement audits to make sure that everything is free and clear in the financials and operations of the companies. And as a result, we get multi-million record data sets. I work specifically in banking and insurance and asset wealth management. So a lot of those sort of pathways in audit to make sure that the numbers are truly accurate involve, sampling these data sets and working with the data in various ways, doing some modeling, pulling samples, various automations. So throughout my work, the automations that we've created using the data from our clients have saved thousands of hours in the audits on our side, and that benefit's ultimately passed down to the client. But my path was not conventional in the sense that I was an accounting major in undergrad and got my master's in accounting as well. And typically the typical auditor accounting path doesn't really involve too much interaction with massive data sets and automation, right? You certainly interact with the data at a low level, but not to the extent that I ended up. But PwC and many of all of the big four firms really have taken significant steps to automate parts of their practices. And really you can't automate without vast quantities of data and easily repeatable tasks. So that's really my way of finding big data in my career.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you to all our panelists. So Dave, I'm actually going to turn this over to you for the next question. I guess we'd start with Jim at this point.
Yeah. So our next question is to follow up is, what type of opportunities do you see as being available for people who want to work in the big data space? What are the big opportunities in the workplace at the moment?
Okay. Yeah, I'd just say I think your typical, the typical positions, I don't want to say not typical, but the background in data analytics, from data science perspective, the ability to, the statistical analysis, as you kind of go through the stages, descriptive, kind of predictive, and then recommendation, all those areas, I think definitely open. One of the areas I think that is going to be growing, I think, is the data. I see as the data management. I'm not sure how the rest of the panel feels, but there's so much to do with moving data, large amounts of data, doing the data cleanup, prepping data for actually running models. And in our industry, we get a lot of, typically data is as good as whoever's inputting the data. So we're missing a lot of data because typically drivers and people that are entering the data are in a hurry. So so we're doing a lot of cleanup and stuff and work with that. The other part I'd say is how do you move around? I don't know if other people are running the same issue, but how do we move around large amounts of data between systems? We have a gigabyte of data perhaps on one production system. How do I move that data to another system without violating internal cybersecurity rules and things like that? How do I download data off the internet that I might want to merge with those data sets? So that type of expertise I think is going to be growing over time. It's probably not as glamorous as the other jobs, but it is, to me, it's like a practical job where if I had somebody that could help me with that, that would be a big help because it would bridge the, from getting the operational data into a data analytics environment where you could do more analysis. So that's, to sum it up. That's
Thanks, Jim. Maybe we can pass on to Shilpa.
Yeah, I think in terms of opportunities with data, I feel like the future has certainly arrived, right? I mean, we are all living in a digital world. If we weren't already before the pandemic certainly hastened digital transformations and the journey. And a digital world is built on a backbone of data, really. So from my perspective, I think the opportunities for people looking at careers in data is really broad. It ranges from the data management perspective, the data transfer, moving data kind of perspective that we just talked about, but also from the analytics and from the use, from the adoption perspective. Really, the opportunities, as far as I can see, are endless. Everything in a digital society is built on data, whether you're looking at it from an organizational perspective, you're trying to drive product innovation or operational efficiency, or improving the customer or the employee experience. I mean, things are much easier, or the volume of data that's available in the digital society is immense, and the ability to use it is where the opportunities are. And take your pick. I feel like we are very much in the 21st century, finally, when it comes to data.
Great, thank you. Emily.
So I would echo what Jim and Shilpa had said about the opportunities that are available. It's really data analytics and data scientists are necessary in kind of like any vein that you go into, but not just specific to, I guess, like certain industries. Really, any industry is gravitating towards data-driven decisions and data-driven analytics. It doesn't just stem to the couple of industries that are representing here today. It's really any industry is looking for it, in different departments within those industries too. So for example, while I work in treasury and we deal with balance sheet management, and my job is to do data analytics in there, that doesn't mean that data analytics doesn't exist in like our HR division, or it doesn't exist in some of the other marketing divisions, right, where they're trying to make data-driven decisions for promotional campaigns, right? So you can really take it anywhere. But kind of one thing that I do want to echo that Jim had mentioned that I think tends to be not as glamorous, but is extremely important, is the data management side of things. Quite frankly, without great data management and those skills and that abilities, the data analysts and the data scientists wouldn't be able to do their job, right? So having a good foundation of data management and those skills is critically important. That while maybe that field isn't as glamorous as what you might hear today, it's extremely important for us to be able to do our work.
Yeah, thank you both for bringing sort of the teamwork aspects of a lot of this work, into play. That there are a lot of roles here. That's something we think about a lot is teams. Mark, I'm gonna pass it on to you.
Yeah, I would second a lot of the comments made here. I really completely agree. And my perspective in accounting and finance is certainly one that I think literacy and big data in general, understanding even something as simple as understanding your different data types, that combined with actual knowledge and specialty in your particular field of choice, I think that dual threat candidate is the candidate of the future. And in many ways, a lack of understanding of big data and lack of understanding of data analysis, I think you'll get left behind. I think it's quickly becoming a requirement, or at least a huge advantage, to come into any field with that type of literacy. So certainly from our perspective, the opportunities are really endless once you achieve that literacy. And I think that sort of curiosity to learn in the first place is a huge first step in adopting literacy and getting that next opportunity.
Great, thank you. I'll pass it back to Jim.
Thanks, Dave. So we've kind of had some broad questions to start off the conversation. Before I go any further, though, I want to remind our participants out there that if you do have questions that you want answered, please feel free to chat them in and we'll bring them up to the panelists. We have a number of questions ourselves, so we have no shortage of questions, but we want to make sure that the people that are actually participating are the ones that are getting their specific questions answered. So we're going to move more into some granular questions at this point. And this is one that I frequently hear from students and professionals, and things are changing quite rapidly. What types of technical skills are necessary for someone who wants to enter the big data space? Obviously, there are two kinds of skills, right? There's soft skills and technical skills. Let's focus on the technical skills first. And I'm going to put a little follow-up on there as well. What are your suggestions for staying current with the technical skills that are emerging? Because I'm sure that's a big challenge. So last time we started with Jim, I'm going to throw it over to Shilpam to start things off this time. Shilpam, if you could field that one, that would be great.
Sure, yeah. So, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. From a technical perspective, so look, there's been a lot of advancements. I've been in this space for 20 plus years. From a technology perspective, there have been a lot of advancements, or like things that we didn't talk about 20 years ago, whether it was tools like Tableau or Power BI, or being able to write code in Python or what have you. That has changed. In my mind, like being able to, I think, was it Mark that you made the point, like having that curiosity, that learning mindset is critical. As long as you have the basic foundations, that analytical thinking, that understanding, a deep understanding of statistical techniques, and honestly, like two broad criteria, I'd say, from a technical perspective. And then you've got to be able to learn new tools or, new resources that are made available, whether it's Python, R, or the ever-present SQL. So that basic, really strong, sorry, I got distracted by a sec. You can hear me okay, right? No echo? I think a really strong understanding of statistical techniques is critical. And I think the other thing that's important is to have coding ability. I think what you see often happen is somebody can do really good analysis, but if you can code it, it frees you up to have the opportunity to learn and grow. in terms of being able to scale what you're doing or being able to automate it. And it also kind of brings that systematic thinking, I believe, that is very beneficial when you're working in the data space. So for me, from a technical perspective, it's about those two foundational skills, not so much about do you know how to code in this language versus that. I think that you have to keep up and keep learning. I like to think of it as you got to learn to learn. That's the constant in most spaces, certainly true in the data space.
Thanks. Mark, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Yeah, I completely agree with Shilpam's analysis. And I would say, I think something to keep in mind is that from a tool agnostic perspective, right, you could say for any specific position, there might be a particular tool that the company you're applying to uses or whatnot. So from a tool agnostic perspective, I think there's certain universal truths in data. And starting at a very micro level, you got to know Excel, right? Like that's ultimately all of your data in some way, shape, or form. If it's structured, is going to come through Excel or a CSV file or something like that. So that like basic and perhaps even an intermediate proficiency using Excel, it sounds really cliche and simple, right? But I think that's absolutely necessary. And then over time, I think as you interact with more job specific tools, and whether it be in SQL or Python, R, or something like an Alteryx or Tableau, Power BI, you go from that very basic proficiency to that advanced proficiency through that curiosity mindset, that sort of, we call it at the firm, this concept of infinite learning, right? You never stop learning, otherwise you'll plateau. So I think that type of curiosity and knowing that, different paths might occur and you got to be willing to take it.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to go over to Emily.
Yeah, I would echo the same things in terms of the technical skills. The two main areas that I would recommend are more so a sense for some coding and some statistical knowledge on how to apply to the data that you're working with. Specifically on the coding side, and I know this has kind of been discussed already, that you don't need to know a specific language. You just kind of need to know how to go about the process of how you're learning. And to what Mark was saying about Excel, it's actually a good example. That's something I even still tend to do today, where if I'm trying to figure out a problem, I'll actually go to Excel first and just game plan, how do I want this to end up resulting in my final solution? And then I'll move to whatever platform that I'm working in terms of coding and actually like incorporate that into whatever language that I'm working in. Going back to the coding, one thing that I get asked often, I think because of my computer science background, is what specific languages should people be learning? And my response always is that I don't think you need to know a specific language. To Shilpam's point, you need to have the curiosity and the drive to just learn and to grow. So even taking like an introductory class in some language just to get the feel for how to go about a certain process and how to think is more important than attending a certain class in knowing specifically Python or knowing specifically R. To give you an example of the languages that I've learned over the years, I started out in C++, went through the Java phase, learned Python. I can name probably 50 other languages that I quote unquote know, and I end up using SAS that I only learned at the bank, right? But through learning how to think about going about the problems through education is how you can basically go about your day knowing any process or working on any application. It's more so the skills of how you go about incorporating that is more important.
Thank you, Emily. Jim.
There we go. Yeah, I think just to summarize, I'd agree with everyone, because it's not learning a specific, you're going to learn specific languages as you're going along, but be in statistical methods, but be aware and always want to have that, you always have the desire to keep learning more. I kind of go by, I call it concepts and terminology, is that don't get hung up on the terminology, try to understand what the concepts are, the underlying concepts. And the other part, Mark and Emily bring up a great point about Excel. Like I always, that's where I go to do my kind of the wireframe type stuff. Okay, does it look good in Excel? Okay, now I'll move it over to, to another tool. But always have the desire to learn something new. And then the other part is, I always look at it from, I'm not the brightest guy in the room, so there's got to be someone's already tried something more advanced than I have. So I'm going to look at, is there a better solution out there there's got to be a better solution out there, or someone's already done this. So, continue to look for those types of solutions. So.
Thanks, Jim. So I just want to remind those folks, I saw a couple other people jump on, which is great. If anybody has any specific questions that we're not addressing, feel free to chat those in, and Dave Sheets and I will take care of those with the panelists. And I have already thinking of a couple. Actually, there might have been one that just popped in. Okay. Dave, I'm going to hand this to you. We did get a chatted in question, so I'm going to leave it up to you as to how you want to do this. I know we have more on our list too.
All right, I'm going to see if I take a look at that. I guess I'm not seeing the chatted in question.
I've got, what are the major challenges you see with data analytics in your company? So that's, what are the major challenges that you see with data analytics in your company? So I'm going to hand it over to you, Dave.
Yeah, why don't we just go ahead and ask the panelists to address that one, and we'll come back to our scheduled questions. Since we've got that one, let's just go ahead and do that. So I guess our first person, I guess that goes to Mark at this point. So Mark, could you care to address that one?
Yeah.
Can you read the question again, Jim?
So I think the question referenced what are the largest challenges in terms of data analytics, and certainly from PwC's perspective, we're really a cross-functional firm, similar to all these other companies, right? You have folks that specialize in all these different areas, computer science, quantitative analysis, so on and so forth. For us, we're mostly an accounting and consulting firm, right? But ultimately, we have a lot of cross-functional teams, and I'm a perfect example of someone like that. Is I'll often lead a team of, I'm sort of that business analyst, light data science perspective, whereas I'll lead a team with, of course, myself, someone on the client side who is like purely business, finance, accounting, and then someone else like a Python developer. And I think for us, the largest challenge for our particular firm is really that concept I referenced earlier of being tool agnostic. So I think we're constantly on the search to find the best tool that combines the power of data analysis with an easy user interface, an understandable user interface, and a pleasant user experience. And the search goes on. Certainly we have certain tools that we use right now that are being widely adopted, but it's not uncommon at all for us to spend a year with a given tool, and then guess what? We're going to learn a new one because that one didn't really fill all of our needs and all of our business requirements, and the business requirements might have even changed. So I think that sort of agile methodology and mindset is absolutely essential to success in handling these different challenges with data analytics. But absolutely for us, it would be adapting to those changes and quickly adapting to any sort of new business requirements or needs that we face.
Thank you. Great. Emily, can you offer some comments?
Yeah, so I would actually say one of the major challenges that we face in the data analytics space is actually going back to something that we had kind of talked about earlier about like the data management side of things. We're constantly getting new and just bigger and larger data sets each and every day, or we're getting requests to look at things in a different way, finding data, going and searching for it, trying to build new analytics and to build new insights such that you're dealing with terabytes and terabytes of data to try and trove through, which can be pretty difficult, especially if you don't have, say, necessarily like the technological infrastructure to be able to handle all of that, right? So you kind of have to make sure to keep up with the management side of things and in terms of what your customers need, what you're looking for. And then the other thing that you tend to come across is that people tend to want things now, right? People tend to want things immediately. So how can you best be able to do that, knowing that you're going to face certain limitations of the amount of data that you're dealing with, right? So for example, if my team's developing a model, we're not necessarily developing models necessarily at an account level because we don't have the technological resources to be able to do that. You'd be building models for months or years. So what are some limitations or shortcuts that we might have to take to still achieve something that's good and accurate, but maybe not the best that we can build, but it still will do this job at the end of the day. So that's probably the major challenge that we face.
Thank you. Thank you. Jim, do you have a take on this one?
Yeah, I'd echo what Mark and Emily have said already. in terms from the technical perspective or from skills perspective or, actual hard deliverables and things, I'd agree. A couple of pieces on the soft skills or some more of the management side that I know in our business with the industrial perspective is adoption of data analytics, the acceptance that, hey, the data analytics is giving, our analysis is giving us, something data driven. This is probably best explained by, a few examples. We've done some studies where we've looked at, inventory traveling around on trucks that's been basically loaded on trucks, driven around for a day or two and comes back as unloaded, meaning that, hey, that never got delivered. We spent all this gas, we spent money on, moving this inventory around. We've identified, trends like that. We give it to the business, and the business, sometimes will come back and say, hey, we're profitable, we'll think about that and deal with it later. But it's like, wait a minute, you have this hard savings that we can say, based on what we're predicting here, you could save, X millions of dollars. So that's part of what I'm saying from like the soft skills is being able to help work with people to understand the value of data analytics and how it's going to help with business. And on the flip side, kind of with Excel, I don't know if other people run into this, but the analogy I make is you put together some nice system interface, they can understand it. And then a lot of times you get to the point where someone says, well, just put the export to Excel and I'll take care of the analysis afterwards. So, so those are some of the soft things. There's some of the things that we have to overcome from like kind of from a management perspective and getting the business to adopt this. And that's, to me, kind of one of the major concerns I have.
And Shilpam, can you follow up? I'm sure you're gonna have some great ideas here.
Yeah, no, I agree with, they're all important aspects. The aspect that I spend a lot of time thinking about is, what you were talking about, Jim, in terms of the adoption, the enablement. So, how do we use this data? How do we change our mindset with how we look? And, some of the things that I think about is like, the way we look at data is like, well, it is black and white. The data told me so, therefore the answer is that. How do we move from that mindset? That's a very reporting kind of mindset. Tell me what the answers were from last year over, year-over-year number kind of thing, versus what is it telling me? Like, being comfortable with asking better questions of your data and being able to appreciate nuances of data. Like, what is it telling me? To your point, Jim, like you have all these trucks going around. How do I use that information to make a better decision? But also appreciating some of the smaller things. I think the economist is Roald Coase, who talks about, you torture data long enough, it confesses to anything. So like broader appreciation of things, because a lot of amazing analysis can be beautifully visualized and tell whatever story the analyst wants you to hear, right? Like, how do we kind of take it to the next level with our consumption, our adoption and use of data are some things that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Great, thank you. Jim, I'm going to turn it back over to you again, but I think I'm going to ask that we move to question 5, which is more related to soft skills. We had some nice comments from Shilpam and Jim about some soft skill issues on this. We had a question in there about more technical skills, but I think we really had a lot of good comments on that a moment ago. So Jim, you want to move maybe to question 5 and we'll go from there?
Yeah, sure. Before I do that, one of the things that, it's kind of funny, we were talking about career opportunities in big data, and Dr. Sheets here represents the data science side of the house, and my program, which is more new, represents the business analyst side of the house. And a few of you had mentioned, starting with Mark, talking about both sides, right? I mean, so I think one of the things that I just want to comment on before we go any further is the difference between the two sides, because that can be kind of confusing, especially since things are changing so rapidly. But the reason why there are two separate programs is because we need the data scientists, the folks who are really skilled at the analysis tools and understanding the in-depth statistics and mathematics, but we also need people who can understand just enough about that to communicate back to the business and interpret those results. And I think that a few of you had actually hit upon some of those points. And I think it was real helpful to hear that, because it gave us a chance to explain the difference between the two programs. And sometimes there's a lot of overlap. It's hard to see that delineation, but I thought that was interesting. If anybody wants to comment further on that, as I ask the next question, go ahead and do that if any of our panelists want to do that. Or if anybody has any further questions about the difference between the programs, you can throw those out there too. But anyway, I want to get back to, our previously scheduled program here. And I'm actually going to go, I think Dave's suggestion is a very good one. And Jim, you started mentioning soft skills. And our question is a more top level one around the soft skills. But what kinds of soft skills do you see as important in the places that you work and with the people that you work with in your role? And I believe, Dave, did we start with Mark last time? Because I lost track. Okay. All right. Then I'm going to Emily. I knew that I was going to eventually lose that track. And like I said, the boxes move around in Zoom, so it's not helping me whatsoever. So Emily, I'm going to ask you to start that. We're going to be talking about soft skills and the ones that you see as important. And I'll let you address that.
So the number one skill in my area that is extremely important in our job, and Jim, you hinted on this, is being able to explain the technical work that you do to a non-technical audience, and to be able to convey back to ultimately your customers at the end of the day what exactly is important to them from the work that you just did, right? If I were to explain to somebody how the, let's just say, principal component analysis that I just conducted results in a certain outcome that was what they were looking for, I'm going to lose my audience. Nobody knows what principal component analysis is in terms of the clients that I typically deal with each and every day. So what I have to do, and what my team is important for them to understand, is, okay, all the work that we've taken, all the statistical analysis that we've done, how do I present my information to my audience that they can understand, and then be able to either opine on it or basically be able to give feedback and affirmation that, okay, we're okay with this approach, or we're okay with how we're going about this specific problem. It's getting to know the business. It's getting to know your customers. That's probably the most important thing that I would say is a skill to learn. And that comes from things like asking questions, just getting to know who you're working with on both a professional and a personal level, right? Just getting to know who your audience is at the end of the day. To echo Shilpam and what she said before, the data visualization is really important, right? You have all this information that you can share. What's the best way to convey all that information in a way that you can get your audience to understand right away? Those are really important.
Thanks, Emily. Jim, I'm going to throw it over your way.
All righty. I don't know if it's a skill or trait, but patience. Patience is what I would say in terms of when you're working with looking at the soft skill side of working with people who don't understand or aren't working with data analytics all the time, because you may have to spend a couple of iterations explaining what you've done. As Emily mentioned, if you do the PCA, explain the PCA analysis. In our business, people will understand it because they actually do a lot of Six Sigma, but at the same time, they're going to say, well, give me the quick answer. Give me the, I need the fifth grader, one slide answer. Tell me what I need. So part of it's just being able to, visualize, hey, I'm going to be presenting to this audience. What do I want to convey? How quickly can I convey it? Even though you've got all this great information, great data that you'd probably love to show, you probably want to bubble it up and summarize it, to a level saying, hey, this is going to help your business. You either save money or make money, or here are the trends that we see that they can understand. So then the patience part comes in, that you may have to do a few iterations of that until people accept it or adopt the approach. So that's, that would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Jim. Shilpam.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I totally agree for the ability to be able to communicate to your audience. I think that's critical. I'm going to add to what Emily was saying in terms of understanding the business need or seeing. So I think as data becomes more, as the digital society becomes more digital and as more data is generated, data is used for more decisions, impacts more of our lives. I think being able to see things in context, yes, understand the business context, what is it being used for, and look at it with empathy, put it in context. What is this data being used for? Why is it being used? Where did this data come from? How was it generated? I think it's critical to think about it holistically, because yes, data might look very dry when you see it on your screen, but the fact is it has real world consequences, and being able to think about it in context with empathy and holistically trying to understand what are the real world consequences of this model that I'm building out or this analysis that I'm conducting and presenting, I think is critical for us as we move into a more digital society.
Thank you, Shilpa. Mark.
Couldn't agree more with everything that was said. And I know, Jim, you touched on this earlier, just the concept of being able to convey information to a layperson, someone who has absolutely zero experience in data analytics. And oftentimes the stakeholders of your work are people who have no background in data. And I'm talking about people in the C-suite and whatnot, right, in various businesses. And from my perspective too, I think something that's helpful to recognize in terms of soft skills is the concept between a cost center employee and a profit center employee. And oftentimes on the data side or an analyst side, you're really a cost center employee, right? You're not generating revenue per se. So I think in terms of soft skills, you have to have those sort of sales type abilities to be able to pitch that whatever work that you're doing, here's the value in it. And the phrase is often so overused with storytelling, right? Like, here's the value of the analysis I just accomplished, and here is where I want to take you with it. And I think being able to convey that information to a variety of stakeholders or really anyone makes quite a competitive case for yourself and for your department.
Thank you, everyone. Dave, I'm going to pass it over to you. I don't see at this point a question in chat that we have not yet answered. I have a couple more questions, Dave, myself. I'm going to turn it over to you first to see if you have some that you want to ask.
Okay. I think one of our scripted questions was the one that was contributed. What were the challenges coming? So we're not going to repeat that. We had a good discussion of that earlier. One thing that we did have on our list and really came up a lot was related to data preparation and data management, data handling, so the long-term information. So working with big data requires, I think as any of us in the field know, is a lot of time on preparation and cleaning and data stewardship, those types of issues. So, and also touch highly on things like privacy and security issues around data. So I'd like to ask, what type of skills or background is going to be useful for someone moving into the data stewardship, data protection, data management areas? So if you can comment on that, I'd like to hand that to Jim first, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. I think, from the data management perspective, I think understanding structured query language or SQL is critical, because you do a lot of basic queries and then do some basic descriptive statistics and look at the data sets that you have and be able to understand. And also, you could do quick reports out of SQL once you get up to speed. And I find it's a pretty straightforward language to understand. It's been around for a while, so there's a lot of information. If you run into something you can't do, there's always someone who's probably done the same work. So I would say, SQL is important. The concepts of how do we move data around, like if you understand basic, we kind of be pretty basic in what we'll do, like moving to file shares and shared disks. And then also understanding, I think, the cybersecurity issues around it. Dave, you'd mentioned the cybersecurity, but also some of the compliance issues. When you're working with data, do you have is someone's social security number embedded in there, or is there HIPAA information that we might be violating here? Or not violating, but we need to consider when we do the analysis, can we pull that data out or somehow represent it with some different data that doesn't expose a specific customer along our analysis. So those would be two big pieces. And then, like, from the cybersecurity perspective, inside your own organization, what's okay to do? Like I mentioned, if I'm moving a gigabyte file from one file server to another within Lindsey, it's usually okay. If I'm downloading something from the internet, I'm usually getting an email, next day saying, "Hey, we noticed this transaction. Can you please comment on what you did?" And it may go that far. It may go deeper as we continue to work, remotely in cybersecurity. We continue to have threats with hacking and things like that. So it's generally good to, I'd say, have an understanding what you're going to do with what cybersecurity is going to do in terms of your moving around big data. So that's how, the summary. That's what I'd recommend.
Great, thank you. Shilpam, can you comment?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Jim was saying in terms of, like, as more and more data is available, and, everybody wants the most amount of data that you can get to be able to do an analysis, but the security and the privacy aspects of it, I think, are critical. I think understanding that in context of, like if it's PHI, any kind of health information or personally identifiable information, you need to be totally on the same page with how your organization's defining it, how it's being used, who has access to what, make sure that you are very aware of things like that. But one other thing that I'm going to talk about in terms of, some of the skills. So like, if you think about like data prep work, at least I see a lot of people who are like, well, I'm a data scientist. Can somebody do the prep work and I'll do the modeling part of it? I think that the basic work of, gathering the data, like all the discovery and the prep and the wrangling of data, I think is a critical component that we should pay as much attention to, and I think is a critical component of the model that you built out. It's almost like it helps you build a better model versus, like the specialist neurosurgeon coming in and put the gloves on and let me just go do the sophisticated one bit of surgery and build the model and step out. So I think I'm going towards, what I was saying earlier in terms of you got to be able to see it in context of your organization, in terms of the security and the privacy and what you have access to, what you do, but then also in context of the data, like be intimately involved with it at every stage, whether it's just identifying what is it that you need, what do you need it for, what else can you get, and things like that.
Great. Mark, can you offer some comments on this one as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would address data security really from the perspective of, well, I think one, right? Data leaks make the news. And oftentimes it's very easy to sort of roll your eyes at these compliance issues or other sort of security protocols that can seem repetitive and redundant. But talk about bad PR, right? And then all of a sudden, if you ever get a letter from your house, hey, your data's been leaked, and it's like signed by the CEO of the company, right? So that's a pretty serious issue. And I think in general, and that's sort of from like a corporate structure standpoint and IT infrastructure that goes a little bit beyond, I think, what we're talking about today. But even in terms of like sharing data amongst your team and departments, certainly with us, we're handling external client data. So that data that's very sensitive and not our own data. So I think understanding the concept of need to know basis, right? How many times are you included in a meeting where like perhaps it doesn't make sense for you to be there or vice versa? Does it make sense for this person to be privy to this information? So I think that's essential to keep in mind as a data professional, and something that's, I think, forgotten in the age of especially virtual meetings where you can sometimes have 20 people on a call. Like, do we really need to have 20 people?
And we'll go to Emily.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to echo what the rest of the panelists said, but maybe add on some things. I'm not really going to touch the security and privacy issues because I think we touched on those quite a bit. I do want to go back to a little bit about the enriching and wrangling and kind of knowing the data that you're working with as part of the management. Some of the things that I think Shilpan was definitely speaking to, I want to just echo more, is the fact that you really need to know kind of what you're working with and the data that you're working with to build the right preparation and management to structure your data in a certain way. So for example, however you structure your data being kind of staged in some certain table, it takes up space, right? Like nothing's free. Everything's going to take up some space, some memory, right? There's certain optimization ways that you can think about how best to structure your data, kind of knowing what your data consists of, right? So for example, if I work heavily in our deposit space at the bank. So I know that all of our products have a 2-digit code that's associated with what the product type is. I'm going to structure my table such that it knows that the length of this field is only going to be 2 characters ever, and that's exactly what it's going to be. It's not going to change. That takes up a lot less space than if I were to set it to the maximum, right? It's certain considerations like that you need to take in terms of knowing your data and how best to structure your environment and your management to be able to handle the terabytes of data that you're dealing with. Because if you were to just set the maximum amount of give, if you will, to letting your data get consumed into your table at the end of the day, you're just going to be wasting space that could be served for other tables down the road.
Great, thank you. Jim, I think we have a question, a good one there in the question section. Maybe I'll let you.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and it's a fantastic one to wrap things up with. The question reads like this: how can someone entering the industry demonstrate that they are a person of value for the organization? And how much career growth is there for data analytics positions in your companies or in the industry in general? So I'm going to read that one more time. How can someone entering the industry demonstrate that they are a person of value for the organization? And how much career growth is there for data analytics positions in your companies or in the industry in general? So I believe we started with Jim last time. So I'm going to go over to Shilpam, and we'll wrap things up with this question. I think it's a great way to bring an end to the panel.
So in terms of growth, how you demonstrate value is really by showing what you've done. So whether it's code that you developed or models that you've built out, or whether you've competed in some competition that showcases work that you've done, with whatever your field of interest might be. It doesn't have to be that, oh, I'm applying for a job at M&T, so therefore I have to have a banking use case. It's not about industry specific. It's about having those base, like analytical, statistical techniques, like coding skills that we were talking about. Of course, the unicorns are the ones who can also communicate and, create those wonderful data stories. So anything that you have where you can talk about, whether it's through datathons at your school or other opportunities. There are a lot of, with the virtual role, honestly, like there's so many more opportunities that are not limited by geography. I think that's critical. And in terms of data opportunities, all industries are now digital, whether there are no more, every company is a digital company, and that generates a lot of opportunities for data careers.
Thank you, Shilpam. I'm going to go over to Mark now. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, in terms of demonstrating, whether you're a person of value for an individual corporation, I really think comes down to attitude, especially starting off, right? Anyone is, well, really what your degree shows, right, is that you're trainable, but not everyone has that sort of working mindset and learner mindset that I think is required for this type of position. So I think coming in ready and willing and able to learn, and really, frankly, you have to start off as a yes person, I think, being willing to take on a lot of projects and everything else. And then as you kind of graduate through your career, you can pick and choose more. But I think that's a great way to really send this signal to whoever you're interviewing with or whatnot, that you're ready to start and you're ready to learn and you're trainable. The second thing in terms of career growth, I really think that the ceiling is up to you. There's obviously many different types of growth, right? There's financially speaking, and then there's just in general different opportunities at work. And oftentimes those things are correlated, but sometimes not. So I think you have to define your own really metric of growth and what your career goals are. But I would say the possibilities are endless, and financially and opportunity wise, I think there's so much going on that it's just a great place to be right now.
Thanks, Mark. Emily?
Yeah, so as far as skills or development that we're looking for out of the get-go to show that you're of value to the organization, to echo what Mark was saying, your resume and what you learn in school is more so to show, okay, you've got the basic skills, you went through kind of the quote unquote training. But really what we tend to look for is, do you have that drive? Do you have that natural curiosity? Do you have that open mind to learn and to expand? Because at least my belief is that when you're in school, it is to give you the basic training. When you get into actual application of that training is where you're going to really grow and expand your skill sets more. But you got to have an open mind to do it. So that's where it'll really take you, is if you have that open mind. That's how that's kind of what we look for and look to expand. And then just echoing on the career growth, it could really take you anywhere, both horizontally and vertically. For an example, like I said, I kind of started out actually technically as a data analyst, working and managing with data. Now I actually manage a team of building models. So you can either, it all depends on what you want to do in your career path. If you want to continue being kind of the best data analyst or data scientist, there's definitely ways to progress up there where you can be leading projects and things like that. Or if you want to maybe manage a team to accomplish the same task, that's available as well. And horizontally speaking, it's not just in a specific area, as was spoken about before. There's industries all over the place that are looking for these types of skills and these types of opportunities. So it's really endless.
Thanks, Emily. Jim, and I do have to tell you, Jim, we had one more question as you're answering this. They wanted to know what instrument you played.
Piano. That's it was good entertainment sometimes at parties. But that's about as far as it went. But anyway, yeah, I agree with that, what everyone said so far. I think the attitude, what how you present yourself in terms of taking on new responsibilities. The other part I would say, and we probably touched upon it here already, is is flexibility. Don't be afraid if you see someone's going to may put you in a position to test your skills in something new that you haven't done. And there may be stuff that you're like, geez, I didn't learn this in the data analytics or the business analytics program. It's like, well, don't be too concerned, because I think people are going to put you in positions where they're going to test you and not test you, but see how well you respond to trying something new, and maybe something very valuable to the organization to be able to take trying something new that they haven't done with data analytics or business analytics along the way. So that would be my recommendation.
Thanks. Well, at this point, I want to offer my thanks to all the panelists for their participation, and thank you very much for being open and answering the questions. We really appreciate your participation. I would turn it over to Dave if he has any closing remarks as well.
I really appreciate all the questions we had from online. Those were terrific, and I appreciate you taking the time to offer some insights. We have just a few moments left. Maybe we get one more question online, or maybe I can toss it to the panelists to say and ask if any of you have a question you'd like to pose to Jim or I or your other co-panelists here. If anybody has a question or comment they'd like to make, we got a little bit of time left. We might as well use it. Does anybody have a question or comment they'd like to pose?
Hey, Dave, one question from from what you see coming into both programs of business analytics and data analytics. Do you see, is there a mix of backgrounds? We've been talking a lot about what background's appropriate. What's kind of the distribution of people that are coming in?
Yeah, we've been running data analytics for a couple of years, and I can let Jim follow on with this a little bit. We get a mixture of people coming in. We are getting around a third, I would say, from technical areas, maybe a little more than that. So that by technical, I mean, engineering, math, computer science. So you see, maybe a little more than a third from there. About a third from business areas, financial areas. We've seen a big uptick in the last year or so with accounting students, particularly. We're seeing a lot of them coming into my program. A lot of them are in that 150-hour accounting program, and so the combination of an accounting degree and the data analytics degree is becoming popular. We're seeing that. But we also get people coming in from a variety of other fields. We had a woman come in with a sociology background who wound up in an HR type of role in disability services. So, I mean, that turned out to be a really interesting career route there. We've had people come in from English and some other areas as well. So our programs, we do want to see some basic math background, because there's some people out there who are really uncomfortable with math, and if we don't want to be having them spend a lot of money on grad courses if they're really uncomfortable with mathematics. That's the only kind of limitation we have. And there's kind of a moral aspect to that. So, if somebody's really uncomfortable with math, it's going to be difficult for them. But we see really a wide range, and I think that's great, because part of it is the technical ability, but a lot of you have all emphasized just how much the other aspects of capabilities really matter. And so I think that's what somebody else brings into the field, in addition to their technical skills. That's where it really gets interesting, because again, that opens those creative avenues for how to use some of these tools. So that's what we see, and we hope to see more and more people coming in from a range of areas. Yeah.
From the perspective of business analytics, we've been live for about a month and a half now, but it's been really encouraging, because we're seeing a number of people with business minors, business majors. We say we have a math person who actually has a business minor as well. So the way that the program is structured is you're going to be taking classes in the arts and sciences, Dave's program, as well as courses over on the business side. So those people coming in with a business background would have kind of a leg up, just because they wouldn't have to take some of the preparatory courses, but the program is structured so that even those without a business background or a technical program background could actually get up and running and enter this space. So I think it's very versatile, very flexible. And the other way we built it is sometimes people will come into one program, decide to change directions and go to the other one. There's a lot of flexibility between the programs. So we pretty much try to build it for all kinds of different backgrounds. And it's pretty exciting to see the people taking advantage of that. Well, again, thank you. This is great. And for those of you who are online, this recording will be available if you want to review that again later. You can reach out to myself or Dr. Sheets if you have any program questions, and we'll do our best to answer those questions for you. But thank you very much for spending an hour with us.